How do you know if you really love somebody? Whether you're single or whether you've been in a relationship for some time, that's a question that commonly comes up. Today we're exploring that question. How do you really know if you love somebody? If you'd like to find out more about this podcast, head over to therelationshipmazepodcast.com. And if you'd like to find out more about how you can improve your relationships, head over to therelationshipmaze.com and press subscribe right now. Welcome to today's podcast, and today we're exploring that question, how do I know if I really love somebody?
Yeah, it's a question that I am asked quite frequently in sessions with clients who just embarked on a new relationship, so it's a relatively fresh relationship, and they often wonder, is this the right person for me? Do I really want this person in my life long term? And then the question that always comes up is this question: do I love them enough to want to stay in the relationship? So yeah, what's your sense of that, Tom? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think even before we get into that as well, it's thinking about how important that can be for some people. I mean, if you're starting a relationship, and certainly, I know in the past, you may feel you love somebody and you think, if I say this too soon, am I going to get rejected? Is it going to strengthen a relationship? How soon do you say it? Do you say it after, if you feel you love somebody in a few days? I mean, for most people, that's going to be too soon.
Yeah.
But how long do you wait? And then it's the other thing, which is, if you're in a relationship and you've been in a relationship for years, do you sometimes question whether you still love them? And when I'm saying love them, again, that comes into what do we mean by love? And
that's the interesting question really here. And I think that's the sort of $1 million question. I've been looking at a lot of literature around the notion of love, and I haven't as yet found one book that kind of comes up with the perfect definition of what love actually is, because people have different understandings, and there are examinations of love in the context of biological behavior, so this being primed to be love. There are sociological studies, there's psychological studies, but there are all sorts of different understandings of what it actually is. So this is the first challenge that we have here in terms of love and what we're talking about.
Yeah, and we talked in an earlier podcast about the different types of love.
Yeah.
There's several different words for love based on, I think, the
ancient Greeks.
Ancient Greeks.
Yeah, and I think their definitions of love are still one of the best I've come across.
Yeah, and today when we think about marriage, it tends to be thinking more based for most people on love, but depending where, culturally that can vary. But certainly a few hundred years ago, it wasn't so much based on romantic love as maybe more functionality.
Absolutely. I mean, I think our notions of love have changed very dramatically in the 19th century with different kind of understandings of what it is. So it's not just about sort of two people coming together and forming a household just for the sake of it, just because, they procreate, they have children, they carry on with life on the planet. So it's a lot more complex than that, isn't it? And it is getting more and more complex, and our expectations of love are very complex. What we want from our partner is a lot, isn't it, these days? They've got to be everything to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually starting right now to think about, what does love mean to you in a romantic way? And even taking time after you listen to this podcast and write out just what do you expect from romantic love? What, if you're with a partner, for you, what lets you have that feeling that you love them or that you're loved, and exploring that and begin to think about as well, are these expectations realistic?
Yeah.
Where do these expectations come from? Because again, we're swamped with all of these sort of illusions of love from Hollywood movies, from books, where we see these dramatic proclamations of love, and in reality, most of us, we won't have experiences that quite match what we're going to see in a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and there's sort of two sides to love. There's sort of love as attachment, love as forming a secure bond with another person who provides safety, stability, care, nourishment, all of this. That's one side, one aspect of love. The other side is the sort of more, the kind of side that you're talking about, that is portrayed in Hollywood movies, the passionate side, the excitement, the sort of hormones that flush through your system when you see the person who you who you're attracted to, which is another part, another dimension of love. I think both are kind of important.
Yeah,
They're both quite separate as well.
yeah. I mean, I think also the grand gestures. So it's not just
Yeah.
the passionate side from movies, but it's the
yeah.
grand gestures we
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
So these sort of things, someone traveling from another, like, the other side of the world on a paddling boat or something. Just sort of these extreme sort of gestures, which, in reality, give us this maybe illusion that someone who loves us will do these things that maybe inhuman feats to declare their love, which, maybe it doesn't take that in reality.
Yeah.
And would we do that for someone else? Do we feel we need to do that to show that we love somebody because we've seen these movies?
Yeah, it's the quest, isn't it? It's the sort of idea of the journey and the quest, and fighting for the other person.
Yeah.
That's sort of very often the association with love as well.
Yeah, and also
Sorry. The how far would you go for me question. Yeah.
Yeah, and also in movies as well, where a lot of the time the love always seems that you're really happy, you're really, there may be a big challenge at one point, but when you've overcome that, you have eternal bliss.
Yes.
Which, again, if you've been in a relationship for some time, and we're so used to these movies and books saying, living happily ever after, as the old fairy tale goes. In reality, we're always going to have conflict and struggle at certain points in a relationship, and it's how we get through that. But even when we get through that, there will be other conflicts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if we build our idea of love as being just being happy all the time, just being kind of in bliss, then we may think, that may cause us to question, do we really have love in our relationship? Do we really love them?
Yeah, and that's often then the question, particularly sort of in the early stages of a relationship, that sort of confounds or confuses a lot of people because they notice that they're not always 100% happy with their partner, and therefore question the idea of loving enough. Am I loving the other person enough, or am I being loved enough? And yes, I mean, in the early stages, we did another podcast on the sort of stages of romantic relationships. Yes, you're more likely to be in the flush of in the grip of your hormones, so to speak, being completely overwhelmed by the other person, wanting to be with them all the time, wanting to spend all your time with the other person. So you're more likely to have that kind of desire all of the time, and therefore it can be quite shocking or jolting when there is a rupture in the relationship and a bit of conflict, an argument, a disagreement about something. That then makes quite a lot of people wonder, well, do we really love each other if we experience that in the relationship, if there's conflict in the relationship? And yes, of course, there's always going to be conflict, isn't there? It's impossible not to have conflict. And actually, arguably, if you can kind of manage that conflict quite well in the early stages of the relationship, that's a pretty good indication that you're going to have a loving relationship that's actually lasting. That's not just a sort of temporary, short-term affair of lust.
No, absolutely. And even if you don't manage it so well early on, you can learn to manage it, but you have to learn how to do it. So we're not taught at school basic skills like how to manage conflict in relationships. We're not told how, what a loving relationship is. We're not taught these things. We have to try and figure it out and think that there is some universal answer, but there isn't. So there is no kind of right, there is no wrong in terms of what we kind of think might love be. It's different for different people, which is why it's been written about for years in all types of books, whether in philosophy or in literature. The notion of love changes a lot over time and is different for different people. But I think one of the keys is in a relationship, over time, love does change, like you said. And as we spoke about in an earlier podcast, it moves from that sort of honeymoon phase where we have oxytocin, all the different chemicals flowing through our system that give us that illusion of kind of feelings of connection and bonding, which, has that element of, maybe then leading to that feeling that we do love somebody, which is before we form that kind of, that other type of bond, which is after the honeymoon period, where it settles into that more long-term relationship.
Yeah, it's a process, isn't it? So there isn't I don't think there's a single point in the relationship where you can say, well, now I know I'm going to love this person. I think it's it's something that kind of flows like a river. It carries you on. And it will fluctuate. Sometimes there'll be more of a sense of being drawn to the other times you will step back a little bit. But there is something here. There's still, back to this question of how do you know that you love someone, there's got to be, I think, when you really love someone, you make that step of commitment. We've talked about a podcast as well about commitment. You say yes to this other person, and there is a desire to really get to know the other person, to have some curiosity, and that curiosity is ongoing. So really a desire to understand what's going on with the other person, to be really deeply interested in the other person. I think that would be one of the definitions that I would offer about love, to be really deeply interested, to want to get to know the other person, to be open to them is a really important aspect of love. And that sort of also answers the question sometimes maybe for couples who have been in long-term relationships where they start to question whether they still love each other. And that would be sort of one of the questions I might explore with them. Well, where are you with this? How much do you still want to connect with your partner? How open are you still to your partner? Are you still willing to understand what's happening with them on the other side, why they respond in a particular way? All of this I would consider to be forms of love.
Yeah, and I think that brings into the thing that real love requires work. So it doesn't just happen. Well, initially it can happen. We have the experience, but over time, really deep love requires work and commitment. And I say if there are two things to take away if you're in a long-term relationship, is both parties need to keep working at the relationship. You need to have that commitment and that ongoing consideration of each other's needs, wants and desires, and exploring that, helping the other person to feel safe when they're feeling challenged, when they're feeling kind of unsafe in different areas of their life, helping to provide that sort of secure base that they know that they can turn to us when they need to, and also being willing to communicate, working at communication. Things like regularly setting date nights, however long you've been with the other person. These things are important. We might think, well, we'll just go out when we have time, but time doesn't always happen. You have to make time. So it's making that time, making that commitment.
It's an active process, loving, isn't it? It's active rather than passive. So it's not something that just happens to you. So you don't just sit back and say, well, I'm loving or I'm being loved. You're actually doing something, I think. You're demonstrating, you're interacting, you're connecting with another person. So it's not something that is just happening to you. If you have that expectation, you're going to get into trouble, I think.
Yeah, and I think, in reality, the word love sounds like a noun, like a static thing, but it's actually a process that sometimes gets frozen artificially. So when we think, do I love this person? I think more, we can question thinking about what's working, what isn't working in a relationship, but also thinking continually in a relationship, how can I do this process of loving? Yeah. Or how can we do this process of loving together? Not think of it as love as like a wrapped up in a box that you give somebody. It's a continual process, and that process happens because partly of the work that you put into it.
Yeah, and it's also particularly sort of when you are asking yourself in the early stages of the relationship. So when, sometimes when I'm being asked, well, what do you think? Do I love this person? I just don't know whether I love them. Then I would sort of counter that question with the question of, do you want to love them? Because it's a choice, I think, as well. It's you're kind of choosing to engage with the other person. You're choosing to be open to the other person, to find them desirable as well. It's entirely a choice. So it's not something that, as you say, is given to you as a gift, so to speak. Here you go. Now you know that there is love. Yeah, you're opting in to want to have that relationship with another person. So when you ask yourself, do I love this person, then maybe the question should be reframed slightly to, do I want to love this other person? Do I want to engage with the other person in that way?
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. And I think also is, when you come to that initial thought or initial expression of love, that's really a time of ultimate vulnerability, is where you're really showing that authentic side of you. You're opening yourself up to potential pain. So at that point, and very early on, obviously, there's often that question, when do I say I love them? And for most people, after a few days, it's going to be too soon. But if you leave it 8 years, that's probably leaving it too long. But thinking, when we have that struggle, do I love this person? Thinking, does this vulnerability come from within me, from my past? Do I find it difficult to love somebody or feel I can love somebody because I've been hurt in the past and I'm afraid of making that commitment through those 3 words that mean so much and open you up to potential rejection?
Absolutely, yeah, because it's a fear. I mean, saying I love you is a fear often for many people. It's this sort of fear of intimacy, isn't it? This fear of really getting too close, because if I get too close, I might get hurt. Absolutely. It always comes with a lot of vulnerability, this whole arena of love and expressing love to another person. You kind of, there's a lot of fear of rejection, isn't there, a lot of the time? And that's why people don't want to say it, because they fear that the other person might turn them down.
Yeah, and then there's the flip side of a coin, where we say that we love somebody too soon, because what we really want to hear is that they love you. So we express love because we're desperate to be loved, because we have maybe an anxious attachment style. And then again, it's really questioning, do I tend to say that I love somebody because I want to get this back? And really, we have to be truly loving. We have to be have the courage to say we love somebody when we have no expectation of receiving it back, which can be really challenging. But ultimately, to really find love, to really kind of have what we want back, it's learning to find that courage to express this without expecting to get something back. Of course, it's lovely when we do. And hopefully most of the time when we say that, that we'll have a positive response. But at the same time, being able to say that authentically, where we're not saying it just because we want something to be given back to us.
Yeah, although it's never unconditional, is it? That's another interesting question. This idea of, is love unconditional? Maybe parental love. Maybe that's the only love where you generally don't have an expectation to be loved back by your child. But arguably, some people would say that even parental love is not unconditional. Certainly romantic love, I think, is always conditional to some extent, isn't it?
Well, to some extent, but I think it depends to some level. It's like recently I was reading about, in the paper, about somebody who was decided just to be kind to random strangers every day for a year with no expectation of having a thank you. And that's the key, is that we tend to find, and through studies it shows that actually giving with no expectation to receiving, it is a real key to actually improving how we see ourselves. Now, of course, that's not in a relationship, a romantic relationship. That's not something that's different. We do have needs, and for a loving relationship, we need to have that two-way thing going there. There are also times where purely saying something for the sake of saying it without expectation of giving back can be very rewarding. But if that happens all the time, then that is a problem. I think we do need to, there does need to be balance in that relationship. It's we both have to give, we both have to receive. And if that becomes uneven in a relationship, I think that can be very destructive, and it's something that needs to be explored.
Well, absolutely. And particularly, again, if we think in attachment styles, there's this reciprocal nature of attachment. So you both are each other's secure base in the relationship. So you both have to provide the caring, the loving, the nurturing, as well as being at the receiving end of it from your partner. So it kind of goes both ways. I agree. It's really important.
Yeah, but I think always as well in a relationship is sometimes, maybe even every day, giving a compliment or giving a gift or just saying something loving to the other person with no expectation of getting something back can be a really, really great process.
Yeah, I think that's nice, because it's kind of getting away from this endless kind of balance sheet idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's often what plays out in relationships, like, well, I've said it, or you haven't said it often enough, so I'm going to stop saying it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this happens a lot in relationships where I feel, oh, I'm giving too much, I'm not receiving, or I'm, and this may come from our own reflection on our past. But also, and sometimes someone else looking in sees that maybe it doesn't look as imbalanced, but we experience that. So it may be something that is to do with us. But then there are relationships that are very one-sided. In a loving long-term relationship, as we spoke about earlier, we both need to be prepared to put the work in. We need to think about each other, helping to fulfill each other's needs.
To be open to each other. And it's back to that sort of commitment to saying yes to the relationship. I really want to engage with you, the other person. Absolutely.
Yeah, and one other thought I think as well is, I think the whole notion of continually asking that question, do I love this person, itself is part of the challenge. Sometimes we have this question, do I really love them? Do I, and sometimes it's that internal voice that stops us, because the more we have this internal dialogue going in, the more it takes us away from being with that person. Because to really experience the joy of being with somebody, to really experience loving, we need to be present with that person. And if we have that internal voice thinking, well, I'm having a good time, but do I really love them? That itself takes us out of being able to love. And where does that voice come from?
I think it's quite interesting, because I think it often also occurs with people who have the driver of must try harder, or perfectionists. So perfectionists who want to have everything right and want to have all the boxes neatly sort of tied up, they often ask themselves that question, is this the way, is this the best way possible? Is this the best way possible that I can love the other person? Am I doing this right? So there's always this sort of internal criticism, isn't there? It's about not doing it enough, or not being loved enough. So I think frequently, I don't know, I haven't really kind of thought about this before, but I think frequently there is a sort of connection here between perfectionism and wondering about loving too much, or not loving enough.
Yeah, and maybe an avoidant attachment style as well, where
totally.
That voice becomes the thing to make us think, well, maybe they don't love me, maybe they're not the one, because we're, at some level, when we get too intimate, we try to push away, we try to create these boundaries. So that could also be a thing.
Yeah, because and an avoidant attachment style often goes hand in hand with perfectionism, because there is a desire to have, there is a striving towards an ideal always. And somebody who has got an avoidant attachment style has an idealized view of a partner, basically a partner who's never going to be there because they're idealized. And they have this idea of, this is the perfect relationship. And if the relationship isn't perfect, then they step away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So being aware of this internal dialogue, being aware of this inner voice that sometimes gets in the way of times that you could actually be really enjoying that time if it wasn't for that little voice in your head. And also realizing those thoughts, that internal dialogue is not you. And that might sound strange, but just realizing those are kind of thoughts, those are kind of things we've learned from the past, they're messages that we picked up from maybe our own childhood or other things that we've experienced. And realizing and putting the little phrase in front of that thought, just saying, I'm having the thought that maybe I don't love them, can help you detach from it a little bit and just realize that thought is like, it's like an old record playing, or an old kind of piece of music that's come onto the radio. That music can change, but it's like that old dialogue that may interfere with your ability to be present now. And you can learn to be more present. And the first step is realizing that internal voice is just a voice in your mind. It's just a dialogue, it's just a thought, like clouds in the sky. They can pass by.
Absolutely. So again, it's back to this point of choice. I think it's about opting. You can choose to opt in. You can choose to love. It's an active process, absolutely, and you can sort of discard the old narrative and choose a new one. That's always a possibility.
Yeah, and we've made it sound very simple, but it's not necessary. It can take time. It can take a lot of work. It might require individual therapy. really exploration, self-exploration. But the first stage is awareness.
Yeah, always.
Great. So yeah, and I think we've said all we're going to say today.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take good care.
Yeah, please press subscribe and head over to the relationshipmazepodcast.com for more notes about the show, or the relationshipmaze.com for our online course. Speak with you next week.
Bye.
Bye.